process. So thank you so much for introducing yourselves, and I guess that's the beginning of our that's the beginning of our time where we are going to begin and go into personal statements. So just like a show of hands, it's okay if you aren't as familiar, but how many of you have either written a personal statement, drafted it, or are we all like at the beginner level? Okay, so some people in the room have kind of drafted it. Okay, cool, 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 cool. So what has been like the hardest thing coming from drafting your personal statement? We don't need to go through everyone, just one or two people. What's been like the hardest thing with writing a personal statement for you all? Go ahead. Thank you.
I think one of the harder things for me was kind of how to write or how to verbalize the tasks that I've completed. I think that was something really difficult, like going, having to look through my resume and
Mhm.
write out things that I've completed. That definitely took work.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I know mine's done, but I think one of the things that was hard for me to balance was that there was a lot of emotional events that occurred in these 4 years that like led to the path that I'm pursuing. And so balancing like
Mhm.
how much to allude to or how much not to allude to while also like remaining focused and concise.
Yes, I think you put a great transition into why I'm here. So, again, I'm here to teach you about personal statements, and I think sometimes what people get tripped up over is the word personal in that title, right? How personal should we be? How personal should we not be? What story should we tell? What story should we not tell? Especially since all of everything that you're putting into this statement is about you and why you are good to be in a program. And so sometimes with the aspect of personal statements, there's this balance, right? That's constantly happening, and you have to alter and change depending on the program as well, and depending on your field. And so, a phrase that I definitely, if there's one thing that you should take away from this entire hour, is be personal but purposeful. So, you can talk about your personal experiences, and the extent of how you talk about your personal experiences dependent on you. I always say, too, like only write what you feel comfortable with, because at the end of the day, a lot of what you're going to be writing in those 1 to 2 pages will be read by strangers you may never meet. And so you definitely want to make sure that not only are you putting in your authentic self, putting in personal events and life narratives that explain like why do you want to go to grad school, but make sure you feel comfortable knowing that you may not know who has read that, especially in a department that you might go into, work with, and so on and so forth. So to have a little bit more structure into why I'm here today, I'm going to share screen my PowerPoint because I'm a PowerPoint gal. I am 100%. Actually, I'm a Canva gal, but this is in PowerPoint right now. How do I present this? I usually do this in Canva. Oh, Lord. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Can everyone see this okay? Thumbs up, kind of. Okay, cool, cool, cool. So for context, what we'll be doing today in this hour is, again, we kind of did our opening already, like who you are, why are you here, what are we interested in or find difficulty with the personal statements. But we'll also be doing a little bit of exercising, so definitely pull up a pen or paper while I'm talking as I'm giving my own introduction and or a blank doc. It's not going to be super extensive, but just to kind of get the mind going as we dive into really the in and outs of a personal statement, the in and outs of a statement of purpose, which is another thing we'll kind of go into, because the reason I always kind of like, even though in general this session is about personal statements, sometimes in programs they still call a personal statement a statement of purpose, but it's still structured differently. It's confusing. We'll get there. But within these 2 sessions that I'll be with you this summer and hopefully continue to work with you all, I always will talk about that at the end, but I always want to offer my services outside of these 2 hours because I like talking to you all and I like working with you all and want to see you succeed and become future doctors. But nevertheless, within these 2 sessions, you'll understand how to write your personal statement. We won't write the personal statement within this hour, but you will understand the in and outs, the expectations, and kind of an understanding of what a personal statement looks like, and in a way, strengthening your own voice. And furthermore, you'll be able to even explain to your peers and others. That was one way I was able to really learn a lot of this, is working with scholars on how did I write my own statement? What were the struggles that I went through? What were the mental struggles I went through and when trying to talk about myself, But I think one thing that I do want to make clear is that this is a very personal statement. This is a very personal writing. This is a very personal thing that you're doing to get into an institution that oftentimes was built with not us in mind. And so I just want to take this hour that people might share their own personal narratives, their own personal stories, so that we are just respectful, that we're listening and not just hearing. We're being open-minded, we're being constructive, we're being supportive, we're being mindful, all these things. So just to give a hearts or a thumbs up in the icon that you agree to this with this in this hour and like support your peers as I continue forward. Cool. I'll continue to see those as we come in. So the reason I'm here, excuse my French, but oftentimes everyone's like, oh, Kristen's here to help us write a perfect essay. And I'm like, no, I'm here just to help you write your shitty first draft. And the reason I say this is because probably the hardest thing for people to do is just to get it on paper. It's probably the hardest thing to do. Stephen King, I know a lot of people know him for his horror writing, books, but he actually wrote a book called On Writing. Like, what are the in and outs about writing? What were his difficulties? And he says, honestly, the scariest thing is just starting. And I think that's oftentimes what's happening when I visit scholars, especially early on in programs in the beginning of the summer. You all know you have to write a statement. You all know you have to apply. You all know you got to do this research, but it's this starting that really is hard to get over. And oftentimes the reason I see this is because this was the hardest part for me as well. So a little bit of background on me, so you can kind of trust me with the words that I'm going to say today, is I was at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I triple majored and I thought, you know what, it's fine. I'm going to go to grad school. I already had kind of a PhD in mind since I was in high school, but like many of you, I didn't really know what that process is like. And also too, I was stubborn in the process because oftentimes I was in Milwaukee Public High Schools. It's a public school system. There's a lot of first gen students. There's a lot of minority students. There's a lot of students that have non-traditional backgrounds. And so oftentimes when we get that piece of paper for scholarships, this is not nice now in retrospect, but we would call ourselves the checkbox babies because oftentimes any little thing that was like, are you a woman? Are you a minority? Are you low income? We would just check it all. And so going into undergrad, I was very much like, I don't want to write a personal statement. I don't want to have to sell my identities basically for money. Like, I just want to show people I'm smart and get into college. And I really had this moment. I don't know if any of you heard about the Gates Millennial Scholarship, but that's a really, really big scholarship for undergrads to where you could basically go the way it was sold to us. You could go to any high school, or excuse me, you can go to any college and have it paid for through this, but you have to apply in your high school. So this was the first time I was writing personal statements. This is the first big scholarship I was writing to, because I was like, okay, even if I don't get this, at least I have my statement, right, that I can use for other scholarships. So I didn't get it, big surprise, which was totally fine by me, but my mentors who were helping me with my statement were really shocked because they were like, what's going on? Like for context, my mentors won that scholarship. So they were like, okay, we're going to really help Kristen get this scholarship, all these things, right? So I didn't get it. And we had a meeting because I still had to apply to a bunch of other scholarships. And they were like, so what went wrong with your statement? Not how are you feeling? How do you feel about it? Just like, what did you do wrong? What did you write wrong? Right. And I was like, well, I feel good about this statement. Like, I don't know, like, what did I do wrong? So we basically, during that hour, sat down and made a list, excuse me, of every little thing that ever happened in my life. Not like super detailed, but a little like icky, right? And they were like, here's the problem with your statement. You didn't tell the sob story. And I was like, what? They're like, you didn't tell the sob story. And that's what scholarships want to hear. They want to hear your sob story. They want to hear all the struggles, and you didn't give that to them because most of the stuff that we're talking about now was not even in your statement. And that really impacted me even to this day, right? Because I was like, so I'm supposed to give a sob story to get money? That doesn't feel right to me. And so, I got into college, I got a bunch of scholarships, and Thankfully, a lot of them didn't have super in-depth personal statements, but as you'll come to find out, grad school wants you to be personal. Grad school wants to really know who you are so that they make sure that they're choosing students and funding students for their programs that they feel is a right fit. And I was stubborn. I was like, I'm just going to give you a statement, the end. And I swear to this day, Dr. Peoples, he's my mentor from UW-Milwaukee. He was so cool. And he was very patient with me because I was dramatic. None of you will probably have to go through this process, but I had probably 10 different drafts of my personal statement because of how stubborn I was. And he at one point was just like, Kristen, why will you not talk about yourself in these statements? And I said, well, I don't want to be a sob story. I want people to see me for my intellect, for my curiosity, for my passion. Like, why do I have to talk about my experiences in my past? And he was like, because those are the things that allowed you to have that drive, to have that passion, to have that confidence, to have that vision. Because without those, you wouldn't be who you are today. And he's like, you need to share this in a way that's in your agency, but you need to talk about it. And so he helped me through, he coached me. And when I started going through the process, not even just for me as a grad school, but hearing my peers talk about it, I'm like, wow, people just keep telling scholars, tell your sob story. And that's such an outdated and a horrible thing to say, honestly, instead of being personal, but purposeful, because that's what we're really trying to share here is like, what are the personal and like emotional experiences that really got us to be like, I want to go to grad school. I want to do this research. I want to be in academia, because guess what? Academia is not a career choice a lot of people make. They don't make that choice because they want to, but they need to, because there's some drive, there's some passion, there's some action that the PhD will or master's will allow you to do. So this is where I started working as a writing specialist, helping scholars and helping them create their narrative in their research as well, because there's science communication. I've done a lot of programs. And honestly, the biggest thing for me is just learning that, oh, people really just want to hear from scholars like themselves. There's a bunch of YouTube videos and like Ivy League websites that tell you if you do these things, you will get into grad school. And sometimes they are just gimmicks to take your money, in all honesty. So I'm here as a scholar, as a former scholar and current scholar, to just share some insights that I've had. And so one thing that I talked about with my beginning, sorry, it's a little long, is this idea of like, how are my professional goals, my professional wants, right, linked to my personal experiences, right? So I asked you to pull out a piece of paper or open a document. I'd like us to just take 5 minutes just to get the brains going. Because when we dive into the personal statement and like the in and outs of it, I really want you to kind of have these items at least available to you to see like how can these experiences maybe be in the personal statement, or maybe don't want the personal statement as we continue on. So if we could just take 5 minutes to fill out, you can do a roadmap, you can do a spider think web, and I'll put these questions back up. But another thing that to give you a visual is I'll put this in the chat. So I have a resource here. And I do a lot of, all of this is free, by the way. I'm not a person that like takes people's money, or scholars' money. I mean, it's a little different from the university's money. Oh yes, Dr. Brown, thank you. No sob stories. But I have a resource here. If you go on that website and you click on personal statements, here I can go back so you guys can see. So this is my resource page. It's my website, whatever. I'm embarrassed by it, but I'm also proud by it at the same time. If you go to writing specialist materials and click personal statement and statement of purpose, this is kind of the activity that I have a lot of people do. I just want you to get down and build a roadmap, build a spider web thought thing of your why this career, why you, and what experiences, thoughts, feelings, role models, events, more led you to be wanting to go to grad school, wanting to join the McNair program. So I'm sorry for all of the like stop shares. I'm just gonna do a full screen on my desktop. Don't judge it, it's a little messy. Um, but here are the questions on the left, and I'll zoom in on that. And then here's here's the questions on the left. And then here's just kind of an idea of what that could look like furthermore. And I'll give you guys 5 minutes. So if you want, you can turn off your screens, or following Dr. Brown's, don't turn off your screen. Sorry, I went a little too fast. Sorry, Dr. Brown.
But you can get 5 minutes for turning off your screen. That's fine.
Okay, but come back at 12:36 with a doc, with a roadmap, anything, pen or paper. You don't have to show it to me, but just kind of get this started. But yeah.
Second. Have yourself probably what you see yourself about imperfection. What's the question? Ideal person you want to become. So do you have a vision of what you want to be when you're 10 years old? It could be. Maybe you have, like, let's say, for example, where do you see yourself being? Your future goal, like at the end of all of this? So what do you see yourself, the vision of RNC, what does it look like? Okay. Okay. Is it? If it is, then yes, write it down.
Just gonna give a 1 minute heads up. I know sometimes people start getting into it and then I call time. I apologize.
You put the career down, right? So what do you have to be for that time? Mm-hmm. But that's the ideal self that it's getting to.
What is right for events and experiences that have a little, oh,
All right, so I'm gonna bring us back. So you all might have kind of noticed that these questions aren't like what you've probably seen on personal statement prompts, right? Like they're not like, what kind of degree do you want? What kind of researcher are you? They're more introspective about like, who are you? Who do you envision yourself to be? What motivates this vision of yourself, right? Which I don't think we're asked enough about. And it's because I've asked these questions to people like, how are you envisioning yourself in 5 years? And they're like, well, I have my degree. And I'm like, yeah, but who are you in 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like a big part. And I know like everyone's like, some people have been like, aren't we talking about personal statements? Like, why are we kind of getting here? It's because I feel like sometimes people get stuck on, I need a degree and that's who I am. And speaking from experience and seeing a lot of my peers deal with this, yeah, but then you kind of have a crisis once you get the degree, right? Like, who are you? Like the degree is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even 8 years of your life. That's a long time. That's a really long time. And a lot of personal things happen. I mean, even look back on your undergrad career. I think Elizabeth even mentioned it, like a lot of things happen. So you have to make sure that, yes, we're talking about personal statements, but you have to also make sure that the way that you write your personal statement is true to you. Because there's going to be, you could have the perfect statement. I'm going to be very honest with you. You can have the perfect statement and give it to 20 different schools. But depending on the school's culture, the school's vision of who they want, the school's expectations, you're still going to get denied by some of the schools and accepted by other schools. So by already putting your authentic self first in your statements, you're already inadvertently having agency and control and weeding out schools that may not fit with the vision of who you want to be. So if you're saying that you want to be this type of researcher, this type of scholar, this type of person, and this is why you're choosing University of Michigan or Eastern Michigan, I'm just going to use those two as an example because they're the closest to us, and they deny you, take no as an opportunity that that's not the direction that was meant for you. Because I think a lot of people take no as that I suck. It's like, no, that no was maybe a sign that maybe that was not for you, but in a good way. Maybe that was not the direction. Because let me tell you, when I first applied, I'm going to be very honest, and I write this very honestly in all my stuff. I did everything by the book and I did not get in. To be fair, it was also COVID. So there was probably a lot of things happening there. But I did not get into any of my schools that I wanted to. But I look back and I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I did it because I would have been miserable. Like looking back and seeing how they handled and treated graduate students during COVID, or just seeing how their programs changed the directory of like their missions and their scholarship and stuff. And so, yeah, in the moment, it sucks to be denied, but it was by me having my authentic self and knowing that this is who I am, this is who I want to be, and getting no's just meant like that they weren't going to help me have a good time in that program, if that makes sense. So, with this in mind, was this hard for people? You could just give a thumbs up. Was this hard just using the 5 minutes to kind of put some stuff down? Middle, I see some middle thumbs. Or was this a breeze? Everyone's like, I already know myself. Elizabeth, you don't count. You already did your personal statement. I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing. But this is really cool to hear because I think this is really important to showcase. So now that we have this, I want you to kind of keep this in the foreground as we actually go over the technicalities. You will hear from me talk a little bit longer. I hate talking a really long time. I like discussion, but just to get into the in and outs of a personal statement and versus a statement of purpose, I will be kind of lecturing, so I apologize in advance. So the first thing that I want you to kind of keep in mind is when you are applying to grad school, you have to read the question. I know Dr. Brown held up a book. I'm guessing it's the one by Don Asher that you were talking about.
Yep,
Yep.
yep.
One of his biggest things is he cusses, but I will, I mean, I cuss too, but read the gosh darn question. You got to read it. And the reason for that is because even though you can apply to 10 schools and they say personal statement, personal statement, personal statement, personal statement, you got to read the paragraph. You got to read the questions that they're asking because the questions indicate what they are looking for in a candidate, as well as what is their values and their visions of an ideal candidate that they want to accept into their program. And that also gives you insight on the culture that they are kind of interested in cultivating in their program. Because here's the thing, you are an investment to them. And I know that maybe sound like kind of clinical and like objective, but you are. You are an investment because if you go to a PhD program, most PhD programs, and you shouldn't go to a PhD program that isn't like this, but they're fully funded. So that's through fellowships, that's through GSIs or TA-ships or like teaching. That's through research assistantships, all these things. So they're providing you different opportunities and they want to see through your statements. And unfortunately, you are only giving them 2 pages to work with, as well as them only giving you 2 pages to work with, to be fair, of how you might be that good investment for them because they do want to invest in you. They do want to hear Dr. Williams become a doctor in the field that they funded. They're an investment, right? And they got their education from this university, all these things. But to be able to cultivate that, you have to make sure that you're reading the questions so that your personal statements reflect that. So even if you, again, this is what I mean too, you could write the most perfect personal statement, but you're going to have to tailor it to your programs as well. But as long as you have the general structure of what a personal statement is, it can be easy to change those structures so you can fit with the questions that they're asking for. And so what is in a personal statement? So I will say again, there are a lot of people that are like, follow this template, write it exactly this way and you'll get in blah, 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 blah. No. I will tell you, I have read hundreds of personal statements. I was, again, just even me being a McNair scholar, I was reading my peers' personal statements and they were reading mine. I was officially a writing specialist for UW Stout for 2 years. I worked with programs there. I've consulted with like Eastern Michigan, Idaho State, University of Central Florida, California, all these, and I've read a lot of personal statements. And let me tell you, there is no formula. I just want to put that in your brain right now. There is no formula. However, there are characteristics. There are at least some characteristics that you do have to emulate in your statement so that it kind of becomes a flow. And it's going to look differently because, again, every program is going to ask you different questions. You are a different person from your peers. So your story, your writing voice is going to be different too. Nevertheless, there are kind of a structure I do give, but take it with a grain of salt because even though I'm giving you a structure, I'm still calling myself out and saying there is no formula, okay? But ideally, the structure of it is that the first paragraph is your personal story. It's your hook, it's your grab. Who are you? This is the time that you're gonna kind of tell the personal, but it transitions into the purposeful. So this can convey and connect a story that situates the reader into why graduate school, why you, and why your research, okay? Then that leads into the background experience. So you've done a lot in high school, in the 4 years of your undergrad, you being in McNair. If you do not mention McNair in your personal statements, I will be very sad. You have done a lot already in your undergrad. You have to name drop. You have to tell the labs that you've been in. You have to tell that you've been in a McNair program. However, it's not like a resume. They already have your CV, they already have your resume. This is not the time to just name drop because you already kind of did that, but tell us what you have learned in those labs. So you can say, a lot of you said, why did I join McNair? Because I wanted to be surrounded by like-minded people. I wanted to learn from peers that had similar experiences as me as a first-gen student, so on and so forth. And what did McNair, by you allowing yourself to be a part of this program, because you couldn't you didn't have to apply to McNair. I know that sounds bad, but you didn't have to, but you did. Something made you want to apply. And what have you been learning through this program? What have your mentors been teaching you? How has this allowed you to gain research opportunities, publication opportunities, nonprofit opportunities, volunteer opportunities, all these things? This is what they're kind of looking to see, right? But then not only, because you're kind of, again, you're trying to show I'm a good investment. I know my stuff. I know my stuff. But also, even though I know my stuff, I know I need to learn more. I know I need to invest in myself more to become the master's student, to become the doctoral student that can prepare me for the goals that I have envisioned for myself, not only as a researcher, but as a person. Like, all of us, yes, it's really nice one day that we'll be able to call ourselves doctors and we'll have this expertise and stuff like that. But we're kind of doing this for ourselves too, because there's a personal drive that we have to want to be like, I have a master's, I did that. And that was really, really, really hard. But I did it because I was passionate, I was driven. And let me tell you, I'm gonna be very honest. Once you're in the program, you're gonna have a lot of ups and downs. And that's not to like scare you, but you need to know your vision so that you can remind yourself of that vision on your lows, because it's going to be hard. But by kind of already figuring that out and emulating that in your statement, does the program itself also have confidence in being like, this person's a good fit, this person is a worthwhile person to invest in, and even when there are lows, they can ask for help or surround themselves with support system or mentorships. We can clearly see that they like to take advantage of programs and build networks. Like, you being a part of McNair is already creating a support network like no one else really has in grad school sometimes. My best friends are McNair scholars. My husband was a McNair scholar, trio for life. Like, it's real. And so it really becomes like a really good network. And so by even kind of like explaining your experience within the program, does the program feel comfortable being like they can take care of themselves, but also they will let us know when they need to be taken care of too. So this is where you really want to show your connection to grad school and like, why do you want this program? Why do you want to work with this faculty member? Definitely name drop here, but don't just name drop like, oh, here's this esteemed level professor I want to work with. That's why. No, explain my research aligns with them in this way. And I believe I can learn a lot from them in this way. Because if you already come into your statement being like, I know everything, then why are you applying to grad school? You know, you want to show some curiosity and room for growth because they want to, again, invest in your learning as well. So this is kind of the general, like this is kind of the flow, right? This is the general flow of how a statement is written. So I do want to take a step back and go back to this document. It might be a little hard to see. I apologize. I don't know. I have a large screen, so it might be small, so I'll zoom in. But I want to give you some ideas of what a personal statement is like. And I go really in depth. I apologize. I write a lot in these infographics. I love an infograph. I cannot write a book, but this is my bread and butter. One thing I want to say about the personal is that oftentimes when people think about writing the personal statement, they think about, okay, I need to tell my sob story. I need to tell my trauma. And I don't always think that is a great mindset. And oftentimes, unfortunately, that has been the mindset that has been passed down generationally from scholar to scholar. And that's not to, you know, be mean to our past like scholars or mentors. It's just that that was kind of like the toxic rhetoric that they had to navigate, that they had to figure out, like, if I tell my sob story, I get into grad school. And if it's the one thing I have to swallow my pride for to get a free education, let's do it. But now we have a huge generation of scholars that it's not a good, it's a cycle that needs to be broken. You need to be comfortable with sharing what you feel comfortable with. And it's starting to become a thing where we want to make sure, yes, you should share your personal if that is something that's really important to you, but there also needs to be a purposeful. And the reason I say that is because I have a lot of scholars who just like share anything and everything about their personal life, or they share the most deepest thing that they haven't even told their friends and families about, and they submit their application and then they get a rejection. And the problem with this is that even though the university might just be rejecting because this isn't a good fit, this isn't like right, they're obviously taking it with a grain of salt that there is a lot of discrimination and all these things happening in the graduate admission process. That's a whole other lecture. We cannot get into that right now, but they take it personally because they put themselves in this statement. They did not feel comfortable with what they wanted to, but they believed if they did this, that would give them an acceptance. And when they didn't get the acceptance, they took that as I am not enough. I am wrong. I am not a good fit. Versus there's a lot of things happening in the department that could have just been like, we just don't have the money. You were in our top and we just couldn't give you that offer package. So that's my like biggest rule is just be comfortable, be personal, but purposeful too. But that doesn't mean you can't be authentic and share things about yourself. You just have to learn how to talk about it. So here's some examples that I kind of cultivated from reading so many personal statements. So for instance, a young female identifying scholar was told she was dumb in a science class, and that story and experience motivated her to pursue a STEM undergraduate degree and found joy in that work that she did when she initially was taunted for it. Another one, a queer identifying scholar never heard growing up historical stories or narratives about individuals that share their identity. Therefore, they decided to pursue a graduate degree where they can aim to archive LGBTQ or queer elder stories. Another one, a male identifying scholar from a non-traditional background, one who joined the workforce before starting their undergraduate degree, saw the pressures of masculinity placed on his peers, and now wants to pursue a graduate degree addressing the spectrum of how people see and unintentionally reinforce toxic masculinity. Within one sentence, I see their personal story and I see their purposefulness within that story. And so obviously you have more than one sentence, but this could be a nice challenge or exercise, maybe not challenge, sorry, a nice exercise for you. Like if you had to write your personal and purposeful in one sentence, what would that look like? And that should be your guiding point as well. So as we continue forward, like I said, I broke it down with personal story. There's more information in this infographic of what that kind of looks like. I have kind of like a spreadsheet of what that is and how you can exercise that. But again, there is no formula. Sometimes I read papers where paragraph 5 is paragraph 2. I sometimes read scholars where they don't even include paragraph 5. They just include paragraph 4, 3, and 1. It all depends on how you feel, but by practicing to get it all down on paper, you know the elements of what to work for, so that again, when you read the question and you read the prompts that your program is asking you to respond to, you have all the tools in your tool belt to work with to cultivate that perfect statement, that tailored statement for them. Okay. I will continue forward and then definitely put your questions in the chat and we'll address it at the end. But I want to make sure that people, we get through this in time and then I can leave everything open for questions at the end. So now let's talk about statement of purpose. So we went in this whole thing about personal statement, and the reason I did it is because this is probably this type of statement, personal statement, is the one you're probably going to most encounter. However, especially in social sciences, I will say, or STEM-related fields, you might hear statement of purpose instead. Now, I will say statement of purpose and personal statement are like two sides of the same coin, but two different sides. So personal statement allows you to have maybe a little bit more reflexivity, personality, diving into personal experiences. Statement of purpose is kind of the opposite. So in the personal statement, we started with the personal and we got into the statement, right? We got into the personal and how does it connect with anything. Now we're doing it a little different. And this is why I say personal but purposeful, because we have a personal statement and we have a statement of purpose, right? So now it's kind of flipping. We really want the purposeful first. Why grad school? Why your area field? Why your professional aspect? However, you can mention your personal connections. So even for me, when I was saying like, I want to be a media psychologist that studies trauma, media, and culture, I explained the reason why I want to do that is not only because of my personal experiences, but by being a part of AmeriCorps during COVID, I saw how isolating a lot of high schoolers were being impacted and how they were trying to digest traumatic media, but didn't have any tools or equipment to be able to do that. And so me having to do this social emotional labor without any guidance made me be like, I need to be this person because this is not helpful in these areas. And I need to blah, 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 blah. See how I got into the personal a little bit about not only my career that I had, my experience, but also why I'm personally motivated. But the purpose of bringing the personal in is because you're putting the purposeful from the front and center. And that's kind of what the statement of purpose is. You're just really talking about the purpose of why the program, the purpose of your research, the purpose of what you have done to be able to be a good candidate for the program, but you're more sprinkling in the personal than the personal statement allows. So kind of again, the structure, you don't have to always follow it, but you start out with why your area of field, bring in some of the personal here, go into your research labs and scholarly input. You can go a little bit more name droppy in these areas because they really want to know like who, what lab, and what did you do? Like, did you learn R? Did you do SPSS? Did you do bio feedback? Did you do animal experiments? Like, what did you do? Because that shows your ability to have a multifaceted skill set that could be helpful in more intricate experiments or even like archival work or extensive lit reviews or publications and stuff like that. They want to see strong skill sets that you will be able to bring into their department and that they can foster further. But again, don't list, just demonstrate how you are ready for grad school is basically what they're looking for. And then one thing that a lot of people do is like, oh, I believe this program is best for me because of X, Y, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But they don't say why the program is good for you all. Like you should write, why is Oregon State, I know a lot of you are going there, good for you? Why is Oregon State a good program for you? How will they take care of you? How will they support your research? Like in my personal statement, I was like, the University of Michigan, I said this a lot better, but I was like, the University of Michigan has money for research, for complicated research. And I have complicated research ideas. So I want your money. I said this a lot better. But specifically too, they had anti-racist research funds. And I was very interested in diversity research funds and anti-racist research funds because a lot of my work fits within those molds. And for them, hearing that as like a committee member, they're like, not only will this person take advantage of our opportunities, of our money, because they want you to use their money, but they're pushing forward initiatives that they need us for. They want us to do more research in these areas. And so by seeing students already think about how they're going to utilize those opportunities is really a nice feather in the cap. But again, a lot of this is purposeful. A lot of this is a little bit more resume kind of objective point, but you can still sprinkle in the personal. So I know we're kind of getting up on the hour, and I just want to mention too that I have more in depth of this infographic. I do write a lot, so I apologize, but there's all these really good activities in here and such. But
We still have time, Kristen. We don't end until 1:30.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, then this is perfect anyways. But I still I know like questions take, I was thinking like 12 or 1:15, excuse me. But nevertheless, we're still good on time. A lot of what I've been talking to you about is lecture based, and I don't like lecturing to you all. So what I want you to do is just kind of think about what I've talked about and start thinking about like what questions do you have or how can I help you right now in this moment, have more clarity in what a personal statement is versus a statement of purpose. And just to reiterate, the best way to summarize a personal statement is that they want you to know you, but also how you became you that allows them to feel comfortable in accepting you into their graduate program, right? Now, the statement of purpose is a little bit more objective, where they want to know why you as a scholar, why you as a researcher, why you as an intellect, and also how maybe some of your personal aspects around those goals have impacted, again, why you for this program. So I can pull up the PowerPoint and any slides that you may want to reflect on to assist your questions, but does anyone have any questions right now off the bat or any clarity points that I can dive into deeper with the personal statement and statement of purpose?
When it comes to given your experience and like the knowledge that you already possess on why that grad program would be good for you, how do you tread the line between actually giving your experience and without sounding pompous or arrogant towards like actually like being qualified for that program? Because I feel like that can sometimes be a very fine line. Like in personal statements I've written, I've had to revise it because I'm like, I sound kind of like a pardon, but I sound like an ass. Like I just it's hard not to do that sometimes.
Okay, this first off, amazing question. This is a great question that I get a lot. And so there's two sides to this question. One, you're right. I think when there is fine lines with that, but I think that helps that nervousness of feeling like, oh, I'm coming across like an ass or pompous or like egotistical, all these things comes with having confidence in your writing voice. So when you are developing your writing voice, you're also developing how you speak about yourself. And so by honing into that, like if I were to explain myself to my family, to my friends, to my peers, practice, like how would you like explain what you're doing or talk about your accomplishments with different people in the room? That helps you develop your writing voice to where it's not coming across like, oh, look at me and look at all these things I've done, but can I just be clear and show and be proud of what I have done so you can see how much passion I have behind the work. Now, here's the other caveat to that. No one else except for trio scholars do I hear this question from. The reason for that is because oftentimes they are told to be braggy. And I feel like this is where, imposter syndrome is kind of a buzzword, but there is truth in a lot of that. There is imposter syndrome happening. There is confidence issues happening. There is just validation issues happening because we're always trying to shrink ourselves because no matter what your personal experiences are, you have faced some type of that in your lives, being with the identities first gen, low income, minority, woman, like gender, sexuality, that you have had to lessen yourself because for the well-being of other people. This is not the time and space to worry about those other people. This is your well-being, this is your future, and this is your education that you are really trying to advocate for. Because let me tell you, I actually have a couple friends, good for them because they're getting their bank, but they work in really nice areas, private high schools, really nice universities, and they'll have their students have classes. Like they will have classes of how to apply to elite Ivy League undergrad schools. And they're not telling them, oh, don't try to sound pompous because you did this cool lab or you wrote this paper. I mean, they're in high school, so they probably don't have this, but you know what I mean. Or you did this activity or you did this nonprofit, like da da da. They're telling them, don't mention your second lake house. And that is a fact. Like, I thought that was a joke because I was kind of in the, like, I've heard that and I was like, oh, that's just kind of like a folklore, like, joke. No. My one friend who I went to high school with, who's now teaching in a private sector in high school, teaching English to freshmen, they're already writing their personal statements for undergrad. So this is just, and this is part of the reality because again, this is why you're in a program like this, right? Like I didn't know about this until after my undergrad and after I had people who who are experiencing the world in different ways that are telling me this. And if I would have known that in my undergrad, let me tell you, I already didn't have issues as much. I mean, I did, but like I was like, this is my accomplishment here, 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 here. I really want to get into grad school. But let me tell you, there is not anyone telling Ivy League undergrads to not lessen themselves. And I think that's a really big already gap into how we approach grad school with trio scholars, and we're trying to help you all approach grad school in a different way versus and no offense to well, okay, maybe offense, but they have better resources and stuff like that that are telling them you need to list this person, you need to list this opportunity, you need to list all these things so you can get into grad school. And thankfully you have Dr. Brown telling you those things, but if programs like this didn't exist, I think it'd be really hard for a lot of us to feel confident enough to apply to grad school or think that we could be a doctor one day. That was a lot, so I apologize, but does that help answer your question?
100% perfectly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool.
So I have a question. So my question is, as far as like, I know you said only share like what you're comfortable with sharing as far as like the first half of your personal statement, but like should there be like a limit, as not limit, but I'm gonna just go with the word limit. I know there's
Yeah,
another word I can use. As far as like what you should share.
that's a great question. I think it depends, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit more with the diversity statement workshop because I think this is where a lot of that comes through. With the personal statement, I think you can talk about anything that you feel comfortable with as long as there's a purpose to why you're bringing it up. And the only reason I say that is because Dr. Brown will know you all very well by the end of the semester or end of this year, end of this summer, um, depending on how everyone got introduced to McNair or where you're at. Your peers will know you very well, your family will know you very well, but these are people that don't know you very well that will read your statement. So you just have to be mindful of like, I feel fine talking about this statement maybe, or I feel comfortable with this. You also have to think about impressions and how you're going to carry that. So I will kind of give like TMI warning. I'm going to use an example that involves suicide, but so please take a moment to take care of yourself. But I think it's an important example just to illustrate what you're talking about. So I'm going to take a sip of coffee in case people need to leave. But I had a I had a scholar who I was doing a workshop with this for, and they really wanted to go into social work, especially the PhD program. And their research is about suicide. Their research is about suicide, especially amongst young men of color. And so when we were in our private office and I was like, well, why are you interested in this? He said, because I was one of those young men. And he's like, this is where I'm battling the line because I want to be like, this is my personal and here's my purposeful, but there's a lot of stigma around that. And there's a lot of like issues where are they going to judge me when I enter the program? I don't know who like will read this statement and who knows I have this history. And I was like, well, do you feel comfortable writing this? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, here's the thing that you just might want to prepare for. And I think this should be a big thing for everyone. When you submit all your applications and you're probably going to start hearing back, have like a social support plan. Maybe you have a friend that will open up that email with you. Maybe you'll already be like, I opened it, yay or nay. I still have an amazing, beautiful day planned because I know I will need to be taken care of either way. Because he really wanted to show that he was very true to himself, true to his research, and true to the people that he wanted to work with. But one thing he was really worried about is taking that rejection as a rejection of him, right? But I also said to him, as like a side note, and I think I've already kind of said this, is that if they are saying no to you, that is not your journey to go to them because that no might be a safe haven, or not safe haven, excuse me. That no might be a indicator that that is not a safe place for you to do your work. If they cannot handle, and maybe they do have stigma, and unfortunately, you can never always really know. Again, different lecture series on all of that stuff, especially with the affirmative action stuff that happened last year. Um, Maybe that's a sign that they would not take care of you or care about your research or care about you, especially if they are not viewing you as an authentic person. And so I told them you're gonna have to take a little bit more drafting. So you really want to make sure that not only is your story being taken care of, but also again, you are kind of sharing this story with people that you don't know. So maybe someone who's reading this story does have a history of suicide too. So you just have to be mindful of like, and again, you shouldn't always have to you should not dim yourself for other people, especially strangers, but you just want to be mindful that your story is as authentic and true to yourself and one that you feel comfortable knowing that will be sent out across the nation to different people in different universities. And to also prepare yourself that even if there is a rejection, you know that that is not going to impact you in your journey and your drive and your passion. Does that help? I know that example was kind of deep or kind of heavy, but does that help with some of the limitations that maybe you're talking about? Because again, it's very personal. Like everyone's goalpost is a little bit different.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And like I said, I think like we'll kind of dive into this a little bit more with the diversity statement. But you will have a lot more room in diversity statements to dive into those personal things. But you just really want to make sure, what is my personal and purposeful that you feel comfortable talking about. So even if you did talk about that, you want to make sure that your personal isn't distracting also from your successes as well. Because sometimes people will want to bring up stuff. But I always ask, is this a diversity statement area or is this a personal statement area? And again, it's not to tell them don't put that in. It's just like, where do we want to put this? Like, what narrative are we trying to craft for you? Because they will only get pieces of paper that tell your story. So yeah, that's a great question. I hope I answered it okay, and I hope everyone's taking care of themselves. So if anyone left, we're not talking about it anymore.
I really appreciate that, Kristen, how you mentioned, how do you assess when you receive a rejection letter? And I know, we had a conversation about this with seniors earlier in the year because a number of them had received rejections, and it was a conversation, about, how do you feel in this moment and how you process what a rejection means. So I really appreciate the example that you used because it gave context to not only, could there be, insufficient funding or other things, but also it may give an indication that this university is really not the best place for you. And, I think that kind of adds a little bit more context to how to process rejection letters when they come in.
Yes, and I appreciate you saying that because I would have probably had a different viewpoint if I didn't get completely rejected my first round. And I think that's something else too. Like, there's a lot of people out there that will be like, I got into every school nonstop, blah, 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 blah. I don't trust those people. No, I don't trust those people. Like, I'm coming to you telling you, I did not get in my first time in grad school. And I did everything like by the book, right? See that book that Dr. Brown is going to give you? That's Don Asher saying, if you follow this formula, it will get you. I mean, he doesn't really say that, but like I followed that book to the T. I listened to my mentors. I drafted everything. Everything was good, and I didn't get in. And I think like thankfully, I think a pandemic was happening, so I think like it helped a little bit more. Like, oh, some schools really did tell me they want their resources to the grad students that they have, not to the incoming ones, because they didn't know if they could support them. So that provided, external things. But then I would talk to my mentors and they'd be like, well, there's funding stuff or like, experience things or it's like, why wasn't I told this before? Why wasn't I prepared for rejections? Because no one prepared me for a rejection. Because everyone else was saying like, oh, it's Kristen, she'll get in, blah, 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 blah. And I really believe that because that's what they were telling me, but I wish they wouldn't have told me that because, or at least not, even if they did believe that, at least help me prepare. You might get a rejection or you might not get in. But that doesn't mean you aren't meant to be there. Because I'm here now. It's good. I'm in a great program. And I'm doing all these things. And so I might sound heavy when I say stuff like that or discouraging. And I don't mean to come across discouraging, but I think it's just a reality. You will not get accepted everywhere. But that doesn't mean you don't belong there, right? You do all deserve to have an education that you desire. So yeah, thank you, Dr. Rod. But any other questions of personal statements or even just grad school too? Like I know people have been kind of navigating what that looks like, what happens after you get accepted, anything like that.
I got a question if nobody else does. So when you went through the first round of applying and you got denied, I'm assuming that when you applied again, did you apply to different schools, different programs? And how did you decide what was your ideal program the second time around that was different than the first time?
Yeah, thanks for that question because I really have to thank my then boyfriend, but now my husband, for it because so for background, I was trained to be a clinical neuroscientist. Like that was my goal, that was my dream. I really wanted to do that. It sounded really cool too. Like, oh, I'm a neuroscientist, like like all that stuff. And I really wanted to focus on trauma, right? And so I applied to everywhere, but I was having a hard time meeting like some programs have like some TRIO programs have like can you apply to at least 5? Can you apply to at least 8? Like so on and so forth. And my goal was kind of like 7, 8. like that was my personal thing. Especially two clinical psychology programs are really, really hard to get into. Really, really hard. Probably one of the hardest programs ever. So I wanted to apply to more and I was having a hard time. And thankfully, he was like, well, you say trauma, but I hear you kind of talk about media a lot too. Maybe you should kind of look into that. And there was one program, Irvine, that I applied to. And I got interviews for 4 out of 8, which is pretty high statistically. And I found out, like, yeah, Irvine was pretty close to what I actually felt like would be a good home. However, it was in California. And I have a lot of family obligations here, being firstborn and all that fun stuff. So I was a little worried about that. But even though I was rejected from all the places, and honestly, too, there was a lot of like, how do I say it? There was a lot of like cultural classes, let's just put it like that. And also experience clashes, because like I didn't have a master's, and all of a sudden I'm in an interview room where everyone having at least 1 or 2 masters, which is kind of like a nice like ego boost a little bit, but also it just shows the breadth of how much I needed to work still. So even though I got those rejections, I really sat down and I was like, what school, if I did get accepted, would I feel most inclined to accept? And it was Irvine. But the problem again was location. I really couldn't like go there, especially now that we were in the pandemic too. I was like, my grandparents were old. I have siblings to take care of. Like, it's really, really hard. And people don't talk about that either. It's like, everyone's like, just follow the money, follow the education. It's like, no, we're going to be there for 5 to 8 years. I need my support system. I need to make sure that it's a place that my husband can go to too, you know? Like, I don't think people talk about this too much. So I sat down and I was like, what do I really want to learn? And I was like, trauma, psychology. I still got my neuroscience in me, and media. And so I looked up one day media psychology, and I will say I was a little bit more strategic. I was more strategic in what I was applying for because I only applied to 3 to 4 programs, and I actually only applied to 2 PhDs and 2 masters, because the master's thing, like I was the only person in a lot of my interviews where I did not have a master. So I kind of felt like, oh, am I missing a step or something? Because I was always told maybe don't do that. So I applied for masters just in case, got into those pretty easily. But then the only 2 programs that kind of did media psychology was Stanford and University of Michigan. And I was not going to get into Stanford, and Stanford was on a coast too. So University of Michigan was my yes. And even though it was kind of like my only yes, if you look at my record, it was the yes that I was more strategic about. It was the yes that I made sure my personal statement was more true. And it was the yes that got me a lot of opportunities to where I'm an NSF GRP fellow. I have like over $25,000 in grants I've gotten just being a 3rd year. Like, there's a lot of things that even if you get your one yes, because everyone kind of prioritizes like, I want 20 yeses or something like that. It's like, but you're only gonna choose one.
Right.
So, so it doesn't matter if you get 20 or 10 or whatever, you're gonna choose one. So I think like once I was more strategic and true to like what my vision of myself, what do I feel happy, calling myself a researcher, feeling supported. And also, thankfully, I did have a couple peers that got in their first round, and they were at the University of Michigan. So I had people, again, go to your visits, go talk to college or graduate students, because let me tell you, they'll spill the tea about their entire department off record, but they'll spill it. Like, I was able to have a lot of security in choosing Michigan because of that. And I just had a great support network. I had people that were really honest with me and was like, is this really what you want to do for 8 years in a clinical psych program where you don't have a lot of freedom? Because I did, like, now I do everything freedom wise too. So, and they have really good insurance. Y'all get some good insurance under your belt. My husband, he's a marriage and family therapist now. He did his master's. He's finishing up, like becoming a full adult right now. I'm still in grad school. But he's on my insurance because of how good it is.
Wow.
So definitely make sure you go to programs that have really good like outside stuff happening, or outside support. Like, resources for mental health in general, like support networks, community building opportunities, stuff like that, because you'll be there for a while. And so you really want to make sure you're taken care of because you can't survive without no insurance. So thanks for that question. It's something I'm pretty honest about, and I know people have told me don't say that. I even have McNair scholars. Like I was writing an article. It's supposed to be like an article piece to highlight the successes of McNair scholars, and I put like out of 10 programs, he got accepted to 8, and he was like, "That makes me sound lazy." And I was like, "Why? You got accepted out of 8?" But it's because in some programs, I'm not saying McNair, but just like some people, if you don't apply to more than 10, you're lazy. And I think there's a lot of like stigma or like issues with stuff like that. But if, again, quality versus quantity, right? And that's not, again, to push aside or like, shame that scholar or like the program or anything. It's just probably word to mouth, and especially his field too, just a lot of dynamics I'm not even aware of. But just even him saying, please take that out, because that makes me sound lazy. I was like, but you got 8 acceptances. What are you talking about?
Right.
What?
Yeah.
So that's why I think like at the end of the day, you just need to do what's best for you. But listen to people, like really listen to them, because there was some people that like gave me advice and I'm like, that doesn't really work for me, but it was nice hearing how it worked for them, because then I can meet a scholar that maybe is a situation like that and give them that advice, because maybe I didn't have that personal experience. Like, you know what, this one person told me this story or had this advice that maybe didn't work for me, but it might work for you. So that's why I always say, like, really listen. Even if it doesn't resonate with you, don't dismiss it, because you might have that person in your life that might need that advice too. And I wish I would have gotten a lot more reality advice when I was applying, like prepare for rejection, prepare for not getting in the first time. How do I like narrow down or like no one was teaching me also how to reapply. No one was preparing me like, okay, how do we reevaluate this, right? It was kind of just me. And also too, again, COVID was a lot of issue, like a lot of communication issues are happening too. But I think as long as you know who your support networks are, and like Dr. Brown, I've worked with you for a couple of years now. I feel like she's a great person to go to, and your McNair staff. So really lean into them, because yeah, if it wasn't for my McNair staff, I wouldn't be in the program I'm in right now. Especially also working with other McNair scholars too and directors. They're all super knowledgeable. So
Yeah. I appreciate that, because I know our students are beginning to select programs that they're going to apply to. And I think that having kind of the experience the second time around of how you decided to select the programs you eventually applied to and got accepted to and eventually went to, right? I think that that's great advice. So as students begin to pick what programs they're going to apply to, they can take that into mind as they decide which ones are more ideal for them.
yes, because just a quick side note, I will say like I think it's changing a lot post COVID, but prior to COVID, and I'm not saying trio programs, just applying to grad school in general, all your mentors, they kind of are excited that you got in, right? And so I have 2 friends, McNair scholars, who got into Ivy Leagues, for instance. And they had Ivy Leagues and they had non-Ivy Leagues, but they were still really, really good schools. But the advice they were getting from their personal mentors, from other programs they were a part of that I was not a part of, and programs that I was a part of, they all were just like, oh my God, it's an Ivy League, accept immediately. And it's like, again, it's the name. And it's like, but will they be happy there? Is that a place that they can see themselves being there for 8 years? Because also they were like in history programs. But they're like, it's an Ivy League, like, you can't deny this. And one is still in there and she's doing okay. She definitely calls us a lot because it's different culture, different environment, different attitudes, different people. Like, she calls us, especially when she started teaching these undergrads. Let me tell you, different quality of students, I will tell you. But then one had to be really serious and be like, look, I'm miserable and this is not worth it. And so she mastered out. And to this day, she kind of feels bad, but I'm like, a master's at Penn is a master's at Penn. Like, you cannot deny that you did that, right? And now she has an amazing museum job. She's working for the national parks. as creating like curated travel guides that focus on LGBTQ and African American travel. Like, just because your trajectory changes with your education doesn't mean you can't be successful and true to yourself, because now she's way happier. My other friend, that's a different story. That's her story. She wants to stick it through. She's halfway through. That's hers. But my other was like, this is not going to work. I will be miserable. So I just want to put that out there that like once you get into grad school, I think a lot of people don't, they just kind of been like, I went through and I got in. Yay, I'm a doctor. It's like, no, you will view people that have different paths and different trajectories, or mastered in or mastered out, or were non-traditional, or have kids, or are married. And guess what? You still get an amazing education and you're still a cool person. Like, and so that's why I think knowing who you are while you're kind of in this process of applying to grad school is really important too. So you can take those rejections, take those changes in your path a little more digestible, if that makes sense. Because I didn't really get that as much. So
Well, we're nearing the end of our time. Is there any other questions we have from anybody for Kristen before she goes? If not, Kristen, thank you so much for being here. We look forward to the next session that you have with us, and we really, really, really appreciate your information as well as your personal stories as well.
yes, and like I said, I know I like doing these 1 hour things with you all, or 1.5. But really, once I introduce myself to you, my door is open. Email me, message me if you have any questions or follow-ups, or you're like, hey, I'm still really struggling with this personal statement. Can you look at it? And I'll be like, heck yeah, give it over. But also, again, too, I do have a lot of resources on my website. I'm updating them too, so hopefully there will be more this summer. But if there's even anything like, hey, you wrote about personal statement, what about choosing letters of rec? I got you. Thank you. I will write that right now. I really want to make sure that your journey is easier, or more fulfilling, I should say, too, and more enjoyable, because guess what? You're with amazing peers too. Just enjoy your time. Enjoy your time with your McNair scholars too, because when they say McNair is for life, they really mean for life. And I was like, nah, that's not true. But now I'm married to one. My best friends are ones. Like, it really is for life. But
That's so
thank you
awesome.
so much to Dr. Roan for inviting me back. I really love doing this, and my door is open for anyone who needs it. Okay. But I hope you have a great
Awesome.
Friday and enjoy some sun.
Yeah. Can you put your email in the chat?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for reminding me. Forgot
Yes.
about
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks so much.
that. Of course.